esiyakwadepa osala nezingane angazi noma ngiyobuya noma ngofela khona le emigodini yegolide thula musukhala sula lezo
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. If you can take your seats, I will just briefly give a rundown. Thank you very much for coming through to this briefing. It is in fact the 5th such briefing wherein Her Excellency, the AU Chairperson, is going to give an overview of the work that has been done by the African Union during her tenure. Today is a particularly important session because it's the first one that we've had in KwaZulu-Natal, in the city of eThekwini. And I'm hoping that at the end of it, you will leave being more in love with this beautiful city. I will be co-chairing the session with the MEC for Sports, Arts, Culture and Recreation. And we will introduce the speakers for the session this morning. And at the end of it, we will have a brief opportunity just for some interaction. MEC, if I could call you up to the stage and allow you to take this session forward. Can we cue the anthems? Okay, if we can stand for the anthems. Thank you.
A very warm welcome to all distinguished guests, especially the viewers and listeners from the various parts of the continent and the globe. It is a special honor and a privilege for me to co-direct this program with the acting DG of GCIS. The people of this province are excited to be part of this important event. It is here in KwaZulu-Natal wherein Madiba voted in the first democratic election. Tata Madiba is not only our first president of a democratic South Africa, but is a world icon who has inspired multitudes in and outside our borders. It is not possible to talk about Tata Madiba and the revolution that shook the world without remembering the contribution of the African giants such as Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, such as Julius Nyerere of Tanzania, Agostinho Neto of Angola, Kenneth Kaunda of Zambia, Ahmed Bella of Algeria, and many more. Today, the Democratic Republic of Congo and other African leaders, too many to mention. We want to, therefore, to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to you all for the support from your countries over the years. We pay tribute to your governments and all the people from the African continent who stood in solidarity with us as we wage a struggle for justice and equality. Many of you put your personal lives at risk, and by harboring members of the ANC, its leaders and members of Umkhonto weSizwe, the military wing of the African National Congress. Today, we are proud to say, through your efforts, a prosperous environment has been created for South African children to grow up and make their presence felt across the world. At this point, I would like to call upon MEC Pillay, who is going to give us welcoming remarks, representing our Premier Honorable T.W. Mchunu. Thank you.
Thank you, our program directors, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, MEC Weziwe Tusi, Councillor Fawzia Peer, the Deputy Mayor of eThekwini, Ms. P.D. Kumalo, the Acting Director General of the province, Ms. Linda Zama, the Advisor to the Premier, members of the media present, other distinguished guests, Good day to you all. I suppose I must firstly explain my presence here representing the Premier, who was very keen to perform this very serious function. I regret to have to announce that the Premier has suffered another bereavement in his family, having lost his brother, and those of you who follow the news this year would know the kind of toll that his family has taken. So we trust and pray that the Almighty will give him strength and his family the strength to bear that loss and pain. On behalf of the KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Government and indeed the people of KwaZulu-Natal, we extend our deep appreciation to the African Union. We thank the African Union Commission for choosing KwaZulu-Natal for this important event. Our province has positioned itself as the home of the African Renaissance celebrations, as well as an important venue for high-profile national and international events that are hosted in South Africa. It is in this province that we have in the past hosted the inaugural and founding conference for the formation of the African Union, hosting all heads of states from our continent. It should be remembered that on the 9th of July 2002, the Organization of African Union evolved into the African Union. Meetings ahead of the launch were held at the Nkosi Albert Luthuli International Convention Center, named of course after the first African recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, Nkosi Albert Mvumbi Luthuli. The launch brought together 53 member states who collectively agreed to work towards addressing the challenges such as unemployment, poverty, and equality faced by our continent. The leaders committed themselves to promote unity and solidarity among African states. Many other conferences, such as the World Economic Forum, Non-Aligned Movement Summit, the largest AIDS International Conference in year 2000 and again this year 2016, Commonwealth Conference, COP17, and BRICS have been successfully hosted in this city. We highlight these to contextualize the importance we attach in portraying this province as an important site for the exchange of ideas and finding solutions to problems of different parts of the globe. The province indeed is being developed as a center for cultural and sporting excellence, attracting several cultural and sporting events on a regular basis, thus making it the leader in domestic tourism and a premier destination for international tourists. The African Renaissance Conference, hosted under the KwaZulu-Natal chapter, has remained the most enduring as it offers a platform for intellectual debate and spiritual bonding amongst the African thinkers and intellectuals in the continent and indeed in the diaspora. Every year we welcome many guests and delegates from different parts of South Africa and the African continent, as well as our African American brothers from the United States and other parts of the globe. It needs to be remembered that the origins of our contemporary liberation struggle is closely associated with the inspiration from many other struggles, amongst which were the struggles of the descendants of the slaves that had been forcibly removed from our soil, who continued the fight over generations in the North and South Americas and other parts of the Western world for their return to their country of origin or continent of origin, Africa. There's a direct link between the African intellectuals who studied abroad and some of the leading luminaries and proponents of the Pan-Africanist thinking in America, such as Marcus Garvey, D.E.B. Du Bois, and Booker T. Washington. Many of these leaders of the African American people had many discussions with some of the pioneers of the liberation struggles in the continent, such as Dr. J.L. Jube, Dr. Pixley Kaisaka Seme, Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Haile Selassie, and many others who rose to lead their countries out of colonialism. Dr. Dube had even founded a school in Umhlanga, a few kilometers from this venue, modeled on his Tuskegee Institute, and I quote, to train the mind, the heart, and the hand. That reminds me of our current challenges today, which we describe as implementation, implementation, implementation. Our Premier is fond of saying that practice without theory is blind and theory without practice is sterile. That is the challenge for us of this generation. Of course, the work of Mahatma Gandhi, especially the peaceful protest known as Satyagraha, formed the main inspiration for the civil rights movement led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., amongst others. He was also in close communication with Nkosi Albert Luthuli, who led our struggle during the most challenging time in our history. A few years ago, we had the privilege to honor and host the Reverend Jesse Jackson, who was at the side of Dr. Martin Luther King during his last moments. He recounted how this realization that the struggle for civil rights and equality for the African Americans was inextricably bound to our own struggle against colonization, oppression, and in particular apartheid. He reminisced about the days they spent together with President Oliver Tambo and Johnny Mfanafuti Makatini as they crisscrossed the USA and the different countries in the world to isolate apartheid South Africa internationally. The commitment of African leaders to the total decolonization of Africa was such a deeply held conviction and was demonstrated by the insistence of the leaders of the Organization of African Unity that as long as one country in the continent is not free, Africa cannot be said to be totally free. They committed resources to the cause of liberating South Africa and never wavered despite the serious losses they suffered and the sacrifices they were forced to pay to defend many freedom fighters, but never abandoned them. Ladies and gentlemen, as the province of KwaZulu-Natal, we are committed to be part of efforts aimed at finding solutions to the challenges facing the continent. We are committed to meeting the challenges of the 21st century. That, of course, is the responsibility of this generation and future generations. We salute the outgoing chair, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, for her role in championing the development of the continent. Flowing from her work, we will be sustaining a program aimed at encouraging the twinning of cities, provinces, and academic institutions and partnerships amongst the business fraternity. We want academics from KwaZulu-Natal and other parts of the continent to host regular conferences to share ideas and exchange academic staff and students and help to create an African identity of academic excellence across the boundaries. Sports and cultural exchanges will be used to strengthen the people-to-people relations and work strongly to eradicate xenophobic tendencies such as those that erupted and embarrassed our country over a year ago. Inasmuch as we were embarrassed by the outbreak, we were proud of our response, which was steadfast and determined and brought an end to it. Importantly, as KwaZulu-Natal, we believe that upliftment of the continent and African people in general lies in their solidarities and in the numbers they constitute. Today's language is that of an economic bloc and an economic market. We are committed to maintaining stronger lines of communication with Africans in the diaspora as we continue to be inspired by our common history and heritage. We want to state unequivocally, as a KwaZulu-Natal government, that we believe that our long-term success lies in economic integration with the economies of Africa and the world. We cannot prosper in isolation. Over the years, we have hosted the African Economic Expansion Summit and the Essence Festivals as part of our efforts aimed at ensuring that as KwaZulu-Natal we strengthen the socio-economic relations between our province and the rest of the continent. We also hosted 42 African ministers responsible for civil registration and vital statistics. These events presented the provincial government with an opportunity to market KwaZulu-Natal to the whole continent. There has been indeed an overwhelming response from the entire continent, with heads of states and captains of industry expressing their willingness to do business with KwaZulu-Natal. I am making these statements to underline the fact that KwaZulu-Natal is the gateway to Africa. We are therefore saying a relationship with KwaZulu-Natal is equal to a relationship with the rest of Africa. In this regard, we want to take this opportunity to invite potential investors in other parts of the globe to consider our province for their investments. We boast two economic zones, such as the Dube Trade Port and the Richards Bay Industrial Development Zone. We want the Richards Bay Industrial Development Zone to be a catalyst for job creation and foreign direct investments. In pursuit of this objective, we are guided by our Provincial Growth and Development Plan, which of course is linked to the National Development Plan. More importantly, we have identified the Richards Bay Industrial Development Zone as an important site for energy infrastructure. A key highlight of the year was the announcement that Richards Bay has been selected to host the lion's share of 2,000 megawatts of the 3,600 megawatts allocated to gas power plants as part of the Gas Independent Power Producer Project. This project will involve construction of 2,000 megawatt power plant as well as associated infrastructure, such as the necessary piping, floating storage, and regasification. It is intended that more gas than is needed for the power plant is imported so as to make natural gas available to industry in this province, the country as a whole, and neighboring countries. The development of the African continent will not be possible without the provision of adequate energy. Therefore, we are proud that, as the provincial government, to be part of efforts aimed at ensuring adequate supply of energy in this country and our neighboring countries. The province has some of the highest or biggest hydroelectrical potential within South Africa due to the velocity of the water flow in our rivers, as well as the escarpment of the Drakensberg, providing the best localities. Both macro and micro hydroelectricity production has a significant potential in our province. Other forms of alternative energy production, such as wind, solar, and biomass generation, have also shown potential within our province, and we are exploring this as part of the solution to our long-term response to climate change. In conclusion, Program Director, we want to once again express our appreciation to the entire leadership of the African Union Commission, and we thank you for choosing this province for this important engagement. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Nisi Pillay. Thank you for those inspiring words. I wanted to just remind everybody that in 1953, the founding fathers of the OAU dared to dream and committed themselves to a better continent free from the yoke of colonialism. Today we are part of a generation that is called upon to follow in these footsteps by imagining and committing ourselves to an Africa that we wish to see. An Africa, hopefully, that will be better for all of our children in 2063. And we will not waver in this historic task of achieving a united, prosperous, and stable continent. Honored guests, just over a century ago, great men of vision who led our liberation movement dared to dream and imagine a better South Africa, and they did not waver in this quest. As South Africans, we remain deeply aware of our commitments, working with the African Union, not just as a show of our appreciation, but in the spirit of Ubuntu, in acknowledgement that we cannot be at peace until every corner of our continent is at peace. We must encourage our governments to finance arts, sports, culture, literature, indigenous music, as these are the essence of building the community of Africans. Honored guests, within this context, we recall that the peace and stability and the security that the people of South Africa enjoy today through our open, inclusive, and democratic institutions could not have come about without the unwavering support and commitment of the peoples from the rest of the continent. I believe that is a good backdrop to give a context to why we are here today. In so saying, I am going to request Her Excellency, the MEC for Social Development in KwaZulu-Natal, Mayor Weziwe Tusi, to come to the podium to introduce the AU Chairperson, and to also offer an award, a token of our appreciation for Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma as the Chairperson of the African Union. Thank you very much. A round of applause, please.
Thank you very much to the two program directors. You all look very serious. This is the AU chairperson. This is one of our own. She comes from this province. We call her Umafungwase. Umafungwase is the eldest in the family. She's the eldest in a family. She's the eldest in our province. She's the eldest in this country, South Africa. Umafungwase wethu. Umafungwase wakadlamini, umafungwase wase KZN. Can we just stand up and sing? Igama lamakosikazi malibongwe. Igama lamakosikazi malibongwe. 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 Thank you. You may sit down. I'm sure all women here are excited to be in this room with this wonderful lady. She is indeed one of our own. She is indeed a trailblazer. That's what she is. She's innovative. We love her as women in the province. Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma is a real undisputable trailblazer in the upliftment and empowerment of the people of South Africa, more particularly women across the African continent. She has a long history in the struggle for liberation of the people of South Africa. She's a doctor by profession, but she decided that she'll make sure that the people of the country are liberated. That's why she got involved in the struggle for liberation and also went to exile, so that all of us can stand here and say, I'm an MEC now. It's because of her efforts. She comes from a place called Ebulwa. The municipality is Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. That's how she is respected in the province. The municipality is Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, and it's under Herigwala district. When she came back after the ANC was unbanned, she was very instrumental in forming the structures of the ANC and the ANC Women's League. I remember one time we were together with her. I stayed in Umlazi, she was staying in Umlazi. We had to come back at night. She drove me to Umlazi. And then I was so excited that day for the first time sitting next to this lady. In 1994, she was elected into parliament, and then she was appointed as a minister for health. And you remember we had so many departments of health. She was instrumental in making sure that we have one department of health that was working properly. And some of you will remember the wonders that she did there. And smokers in the room will remember the anti-tobacco laws that she introduced. I know one of them is my colleague. I won't mention the name, but one of my colleagues is one of the people who knows the law, the act very well. In 2009, she was appointed Minister of the Department of Home Affairs and brought about radical changes in the department, which subsequently achieved a clean audit for the first time in many years in 2011. In July 2012, the African heads of state and government in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, elected Her Excellency Dr. Dlamini-Zuma, Chairperson of the African Union Commission. She's the first woman to lead the continental organization, including its predecessor, the Organization of African Unity. This was a major achievement in the sense that for the first time since the formation of the Organization for African Unity, which became the African Union, a woman and indeed a candidate of the Southern region was successfully elected to this high post. Her Excellency Dr. Dlamini-Zuma is doing exceptional life's work to the cause of freedom for the people of South Africa and the development and consolidation of our democracy in the quest to create a better life for all Africans. That is why she is given an award today by GovChat, a humanitarian award, because of her being innovative. Wherever she is, she becomes so innovative. We're also proud of her. I'm a member of the ANC Women's League. I'm the Deputy Secretary of the ANC Women's League. We are proud of her. Wherever she is, we want to be next to her. Please come and receive the award, the Humanitarian Award for Leadership. Malibongwe. Igama lamakhosikazi. Let us stand up and welcome Her Excellency Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma.
Thank you very much, MEC Weziwe, program directors, MECs, the Deputy Mayor of eThekwini, members of the Fourth Estate who are here, and fellow Africans. Let me just take this opportunity to thank GCIS for providing this opportunity. This is really a series of work that we are doing on the continent to popularize the work of the AU, not necessarily in the 4 years. Last month, we were in Pretoria with the African Editors Forum, and again, we were in Cameroon, talking about Agenda 2063. We were in Kigali, so it's work that is going on so that citizens can know what is happening at the AU and know that the AU is not just for governments, but citizens as well. So I thank you very much for being here. Some of you would remember that in 2002, in this very city, we launched the African Union. And at the time, that was in 2002, and at the time of that launch, the governments and the people of the continent committed themselves to building an Africa that is prosperous, integrated, peaceful, and driven by its own citizens and playing a dynamic role in the global arena. So the launch of the AU at that point, following the Organization of African Unity, was informed by the fact that the role of the major mandate of the OAU was to decolonize Africa. And at that point, especially after the liberation of Namibia in South Africa, the Africans felt that the organization needed to be transformed and needed a new mandate. But we must also just remind ourselves that when we celebrated the 50th anniversary in 2013 of the OAU, now AU, we recommitted ourselves to completing the decolonization process to protect the right to self-determination for African people who are still under colonial rule, pledge solidarity with the peoples of African descent and African diaspora in their struggles against racial discrimination, and resist all forms of influence contrary to the interest of the continent. And of course, people may say, why were we recommitting ourselves to decolonization? We must just remind you that there are still some pockets of Africa that still need to be decolonized, and that is the Chagos archipelago of Mauritius. There are some islands around Mauritius which are still occupied. The Comorian island of Mayotte is still occupied. And of course, the self-determination of the people of Western Sahara is still elusive. So, fellow Africans, this commitment to create a prosperous Africa is at the center of Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. Because we decided that we needed a framework that can be common to all African countries towards development, the development of Africa. And this Agenda 2063 was very important because, as we know, the decades of the 70s and 90s in Africa were really decades of stagnation, decades of coups, decades that saw Africa being underdeveloped, marginalized, bad governance, despite the fact that Africa is so rich in mineral resources, in its people, in productive land, diverse ecosystems, oil and gas, flora and fauna. The paradox is that, yes, Africa is rich, but the Africans are still poor. If we look at the least developed countries of the world, there are 48 of them, and 34 are on the continent. So it was important that we put all the frameworks that we have, and we undertook a process of consultations. The first draft of Agenda 2063 came from the citizens, not from governments. Different sectors were consulted, and they came up with Agenda 2063, which was then given to countries to go and consult in their own countries and consult the people. So how are we going about to create this prosperous Africa? Clearly, we have to use the resources we have to create this prosperity. And the most abundant and most precious resource we have is our people to start with. The African continent is a growing population, a young population. So we have started what we call a skills revolution on the continent. The skills revolution means that African children should go to school, they should be educated, but they should be skilled in all the different levels of skills, from STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and maths, to technical technologies, technicians, vocational schools, so that African children are skilled because the economy of today needs the skills. And of course, the African Union itself has also looked at how we can harmonize education across the continent. So there's work going on with 200 participating universities. Initially there were 42, and now there are 200 participating universities trying to improve the harmonization, whether been medicine, teacher education, mechanical engineering, agriculture, civil engineering, economics, geology, higher education, and many others. We have also, we are advocating that we should get more kids in higher education. And therefore, the enrollment in higher education must increase. If we look at the number of students at our universities, they've grown exponentially. But if we look, for instance, in 1991, there were 2.7 million students at universities. And now we're well over 10 million university students that are qualifying every year. But where are they qualifying is one of the questions. They tend to qualify more in the social sciences. The split is about 90 to 10 in other places. In other places is 90 to 20. But generally the split is like that. And that split needs to be changed. We believe that that split needs to go to something like 30, 70 in favor of the sciences. So education is very important, and I'll just make examples of how universities have grown in some of our in our countries on the continent. We'll all know about the University of Makerere, a Ugandan university, because that was the university that was there. But now they have six more public universities. Zimbabwe in 1980, during its independence, had the university, but now they have 12, 8 public and 4 private. Ethiopia had 2, and now they have 30 universities. Nigeria and Egypt have the highest number of students in higher education, 1 million and 1.8 million respectively. And they have Nigeria has more than 150 universities, some private, some public. So this has grown phenomenally. But still, as Africa as a whole, we are below the 10% access to higher university. And so if you are below 10%, it really means that all you are doing is to reproduce the elite. So we need to increase, because you have to be over 25% to start massifying, and you have to be over 40% access to start making it a universal access. So Africa as a whole needs to increase. But of course there are challenges in this area, the financing, not only in South Africa, elsewhere as well. But the view of Africa is that there should be no child that is denied education at any level because of poverty. So children must have, it's a right that they must be able to exercise. If they are poor, they must be assisted. The AU has also identified some gaps in the education, and they've decided to start a continental university, starting with 5 campuses, which are going to be campuses of excellence. And these are in Algeria, in a city called Tlemcen, the Tlemcen Institute. And that one is concentrating on water resources, environmental studies, and climate change. But it admits students from all over Africa in those disciplines. And then South Africa has been given the campus for space sciences. And that one is going to be at the Cape University of Technology. And it will admit students from all over Africa who want to study space sciences. It's the last one the others are already operational. And then we have one in Kenya, which is on basic sciences, technology, and innovation. It's linked to the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. And then the last one is in Yaoundé, in Cameroon. That one is looking at governance, humanities, and social sciences. And there is a view that we must increase these campuses. We must have one on maritime studies and identify others as we go along. Because it's clear that unless we get this skills revolution right, we are not going to be able to reach this prosperity soon. And of course, just to say that next year is also the year of harnessing the demographic dividend in Africa, and education will be also featuring. We also have campaigns for girls to be at school and against child marriages, because it's girls who tend to be married as children. And so we are having that campaign because girls must be at school like everybody else. The next area that we have focused on is agriculture, because we still have a lot of agricultural land on the continent, and we can still increase the productivity of agriculture. And of course, the agriculture and agribusiness are growing. It's growing on the continent. It's grown from 13 billion. It's growing to a 13 billion industry, and we want it to grow to be a trillion business industry, and it's possible for it. And it's projected that by 2030, it will be a trillion business industry. And of course, we are also encouraging African countries to keep putting more money and investing on agriculture, because we have seen that those who have put 10% of their budget in agriculture, they are showing very good results. And we need this urgently, because Africa is importing a lot of processed food from abroad and spending tens of billions of dollars that should be utilized for other things. There is also a problem at the universities. It was recognized about 10 years ago that there weren't young people coming into the pipeline in agriculture. The professors in agriculture were growing old, but there were no young people coming in. So 8 universities came together to see how they can encourage young people to study agriculture, research, innovate, do their masters and their PhDs. And we are glad to say that that movement is increasing. Now we have 68 universities who are doing that work, including 5 in South Africa. And we are still encouraging many more to come in. We also remember that Pixley Gaseme, in his Regeneration of Africa speech, recognized the importance of integration of African countries and linked that African integration to development and prosperity. And many other leaders, 50 years ago, Haile Selassie, Sekou Toure, NASA, Nyerere, Nkrumah, all called for Africa to unite or perish. So I just want to say a few things on the integration. It's very important It was important then, but it's even more important now as globalization, the travel of information, technology, communication technology have created a global village of this big world. It's now become much smaller. The economic shocks, the booms affect us all. The diseases such as HIV, as we saw, Ebola, Zika, SARS, and many others know no borders. And so the imperative for integration is even more urgent today. So what is happening on the continent? The continental integration is based on regional economic communities. So I will talk about the regional economic communities, what they are doing in terms of integration. I'll start with looking at trade. The three, COMESA, East African Community, and SADC, have come together on the 15th of June 2015 into a tripartite free trade area. And that is very exciting for all of us because it has 26 countries and 626 million people and a $1.2 trillion GDP. So, and we think that can then be part of the creating a backbone for continental free trade. So I'll come back to the continental free trade. And then let's look at North Africa, which is called the Arab Maghreb Union, which is the countries in the north that border with the Mediterranean. They have signed 4 protocols of the Union's free trade area. And ECOWAS has established its customs union in 2015, January. And other RECs like the East African Community are now applying zero average tariffs on imports within the community. ECAS and COMESA both apply tariffs averaging only around 1.9%. And COMESA, EAC, ECOWAS, and SADC have also taken steps to facilitate transport and to lower the non-tariff barriers so that trade can increase between and within those RECs. And this is important because when we look at other RECs in other regions, whether it's ASEAN, in Asia, Mercosur, in Latin America, we are lagging behind as the continent, but COMESA and ECOWAS are comparing very well in terms of labor movement within those RECs. We need, when about 5 years ago, the intra-African trade was only at about 12%. Today it's about 18%. It's still very low compared to the average of 40% in other areas. So we need to increase the intra-African trade, but we can only do that if we manufacture. And so we need to develop our industries, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's value addition for our minerals, our natural resources, so that we manufacture and we have a lot more to trade. I'm very happy to say there are countries that have even started industrial parks which are functioning now as part of the push towards industrialization. And this will be great for intra-African trade, but also for global trade. But of course, there are other things we need to do if we are to increase trade, like the continental free trade, which was launched. The negotiations were launched last year, and those negotiations are continuing because if we have a continental free trade, it will make easier to trade amongst ourselves, but also for the world to trade with us. The other area I want to touch on is infrastructure development, because we can have goods, if we can't move them across the continent, we will not be able to increase trade quickly. And also people need to move across the continent. So there is infrastructure in terms of transport, roads, rail, and air. And I'll just mention some of the projects that are in the pipeline, like the Dakar-N'Djamena-Djibouti Transport Corridor, which is being developed. We are looking at working towards making it into a bankable project. There is the Djibouti-Libreville Transport Corridor. The Djibouti-Ethiopia part is now done, and we need to, the rest needs to be done. The Lobito Transport Corridor, the Trans-African Highway, which will link Kinshasa and Brazzaville through a bridge, and the Cotonou, Ouagadougou, Niamey, Abidjan Railway. So those who don't know geography, you can go and check where those are. And a bridge that will, in the Gambia, that should link the Senegal and the Gambia. And of course, we are also looking at using technology to advance some of these. So we're looking at the high-speed rail network on the continent. We don't see why we should still be looking at 1972 technology when there's new technology in rail. So we're establishing a unit at NEPAD that will be looking at how to link Africa through the high-speed rail network. We know it will take decades to do, but the work has to start now. We're also looking at a link in terms of air. A lot of you will know that before we used to fly to Europe before coming back to Africa, and now I'm very proud to say that that is happening very rarely. In part because Ethiopian Airways, which is the largest airline in Africa now, flies to almost every African country. I think countries that they don't fly to, you can count with your hand. They fly almost in every country, so we are able now to fly directly from one African capital to the other. Also, SAA has increased its destinations in Africa. Air Kenya has also done so. So we can see that there is improvement there. And there is also work that is happening to try and create one African aviation market. There are countries that have come together to start that work because we couldn't wait for the slow West. So we decided 2 years ago that we should just get those countries that are ready to work together to create this. So there's progress there. And then there's ICT infrastructure, which is very important, as you all know, because it's without that you can't really leapfrog development, because communication is at the center of that. And we are happy to say that the market in terms of mobile phones has been growing phenomenally. There's 65% growth annually just over the last 5 years we've seen on the continent. And also banking and other innovative projects, information to farmers and e-commerce has really assisted to move things. We are also looking at the Pan-African Internet Exchange System project, and quite a number of countries on the continent, 32 by 2016, have internet exchange points now. And we also have 8 internet exchange points of Congo, Egypt, Gabon, Kenya, Nigeria, Rwanda, South Africa, and Zimbabwe. And South Africa and Zimbabwe have been awarded grants to grow to become regional internet exchange points. And Kenya has been awarded a grant with the support of the AU in establishing the first global roaming exchange in Africa and only the 4th in the world. So all this work is happening, and we are also looking at free movement of people, because integration is not just about money, it's not just about goods, but it's also about people. And to this, I will just mention that in ECOWAS, people are moving freely within that sub-region, and they even have an ECOWAS passport. They are now looking at doing away with resident permits and doing away with work permits in that region, and they are looking at having an ECOWAS ID so that you can move freely with your ID within the 15 countries that form that sub-region. The East African community is doing the same, and others are following, but those are the 2 that are really leading when it comes to free movement of people. And when we look at continental free movement of people, we have a decision has been taken that countries must at least give a 30-day visa at the port of entry for all Africans. Some countries are saying they are still putting mechanisms to make it possible to implement, but I'll name those who have already implemented, like Seychelles, Mozambique, Rwanda, Comoros, Uganda, Madagascar, and Ghana, and Benin is following, and Namibia is following. So hopefully more and more countries will open for that. And I just want to say the country that led this move was Rwanda. Now Rwanda is the smallest in terms of geography, but they are the ones who opened up for all Africans first. And what has happened to Rwanda? That kind of policy has seen them increase their tourism by 24%. It has seen them increase their trade with their neighboring countries by 50%. And it has seen increase in trade with the DRC by 73%. So generally, the free movement of people has more advantages than disadvantages. And of course, if people are free to come in, they come and go, they don't stay, because they know that they can come in tomorrow. But if they are not allowed to come in, once they come in, they will not want to go, because they don't know whether they'll be able to get the opportunity to come back again. So I think it's very important to look at this, and we are now developing a comprehensive protocol on free movement of people, and we hope that that will be finished by signed by 2018. But in the meantime, this decision of allowing people for a 30-day visa, we hope more countries are going to join. We are also developing an African passport, and I must say I've been very privileged to be able to use an African passport when I travel across African countries. I don't need a visa. Though sometimes our immigration here say, no, where is your national passport? And I say, no, I'm using the AU African passport. So I think when we have the African passport, the decision has been taken that African countries, each African country will be the one that decides who it gives, because we as the AU cannot be the ones that give African passport to citizens. We don't know them, we don't have the population register, so each country has to do that. I also want to just touch on the peace, security, and human rights and democracy issues. As you know, in the 80s and 90s, we saw lots of conflict, military rule, and that ended up with a genocide in Rwanda in 94. And of course, with the AU Constitutive Act coming into force, the AU Charter said no interference in anybody's country, internal affairs. The AU Constitutive Act shifted a little, and it said, and it had a principle of non-indifference, that we can't be indifferent to what is going on in another country. So it's a step away from the one that was at the OAU, which said no interference. And the African peace and security architecture has come into being, and the African Charter on People and Human Rights, and the Charter on Democracy, Elections, and Government and Governance. And all these are trying to create a kind of environment within Africa that allows participatory democracy, that allows human rights, that decreases conflicts. But of course, we also believe that you cannot sustain peace if you don't have development. And you can't have development if you don't have peace. So the two have to go together. You can't say, no, we'll just deal with the peace issues. We have to deal with both. We still have some pockets of problems in Burundi, in South Sudan, in Somalia, in Libya, and we are hopefully going to see the end of the Darfur problem. There's still issues around Mali and Central African Republic in terms of security. And we are happy to say that the Boko Haram, the countries that are dealing with it are doing a good job. It's decreasing. And so we hope that with time, we will see very little of it. But we also believe that peace and terrorism can not only be dealt with militarily, you also need to win the hearts and minds of your population, because it's the young people who get recruited by extremists. And if you don't win their hearts and minds so that they don't get attracted to extremists, it will be a problem. Governance, there's lots of improvement, but there's still a lot more to improve. On elections, during these past 4 years, we have actually observed 50 elections in our continent. A lot of them have gone well, but others not so well, as we have seen. We are dealing with the issue of the Gambia right now, where the election actually went well, but the incumbent does not want to accept the results. So it's an issue that is being dealt with. But on the whole, democracy is really taking root on the continent. But you see, democracy for its sake is not useful. It needs to translate into the change in our people's lives on the continent and their freedoms. The other area that I thought I should just touch on, because we said it's a prosperous, peaceful, integrated continent. I've dealt with those three, but we said it's driven by its citizens. So I want to touch on that to say that we have increased the participation of women on the continental issues of youth, of students, of cultural workers, of business, and many other sectors. And as you saw during the Ebola, we had business people participating, giving money, giving logistic for our health workers. We also saw an unprecedented solidarity amongst African people, because we were able to mobilize more than 800 health workers who volunteered to go and work in the Ebola areas. And of course, governments allowed them, and so we saw a very good part of continental solidarity by citizens themselves. And if it was not for them, probably the Ebola epidemic would still be raging on. We, as I said earlier, are having meetings of African Editors Forum, because we want editors and journalists to be part of the AU work, to implement it in their own space, but also to advocate for it, to popularize it. We also have involved young people. Every year we've had what we call intergenerational dialogue, where young people and other generations come and have a dialogue, and students. So, because we believe very much that citizens have to be part of this African Union. And during these 4 years, we've also seen, as we have been advocating for the blue ocean economy, that Africa must not run away from the ocean. The ocean is a big resource, and it's the next economic frontier. We've seen the establishment of the organization called WIMA, Women in Maritime in Africa, which has women from many countries, including this one, who want to be involved in the maritime space. We've also encouraged women in mining to come together. There are campaigns like Elect Here to help more women to come into parliament and to the public service. And recently, we saw a very exciting campaign launched by women, especially women farmers, who actually gathered in Mount Kilimanjaro and debated the issues around land, women's land rights, and ended up adopting a charter on women's land rights, which will be handed over to the heads of state in January. So citizens, the artists have been working and getting involved. So, and of course we also have the ECOSOC in Africa, which is the People's Union, so that civil society is part of the union. So there's lots happening there in terms of writers, in the literature, in the arts, in the films. So really Africans are participating. And we also want to just touch on the issue of self-reliance, because the continent has been having a continuous battle about who funds its work. And we've all said, well, who pays the piper calls the tune. So we are very happy that heads of state decided that they are now going to increase the level of funding to the AU and decrease the dependence on other people. They decided that they are going to fund 100% of the operational budget, 75% of the program budget, and 25% of its peace. And they've also taken a decision that no country should say it cannot afford, and that's why they introduced a binding 0.2% AU levy on eligible African imports into Africa. So this is a very important step, because even 35 years ago, it was said that we should be more self-reliant, but we had not really moved forward with that. And the last area I want to touch on in the minutes I have is the AU's involvement with the rest of the world. Of course, the continent is taking its rightful place in the world, needs to do more. We participate in international organizations, but we are also having partnerships with many countries that have similar and complementary agendas so that we can work together to realize the Africa we want. So, and of course, as part of the work on the skills revolution, we have also established the AU Academy, which was launched in January this year, so that not only for the workers at the AU, but also for civil servants on the continent who can come for short periods and learn about the AU and Pan-Africanism. We have also made sure that the AU has processes that are more accountable and transparent, whether it's in procurement, whether it's in recruitment, in financial rules, and in many other areas. So, in a just very brief moment, I've tried to capture some of the things that the continent is doing. And I also want to say, just lastly, we've recognized that Agenda 2063 and the skills revolution need a dialogue between business, academia, and the politicians. And we are going to have the first forum of that kind in Mauritius next year, March 19th to the 21st, so that the training of students is in line with what the economy needs, and they have access to politicians to say what are their constraints, and this three-way dialogue is very important for us. Thank you very much.
All right, well, good afternoon. Those were live proceedings from Durban, where we've just seen African Union Commission Chairperson.
AU Commission Chairperson Mafungwase, as passionately MEC2C introduce you. In fact, we want to say that you are really our leader. As women, we look upon you. In most cases, you come up with new things wherever you go. In health, you introduce new policies. Also, when you are assigned as foreign minister, we also introduce new policies. I remember that when you talk about free movement of people in the continent, that you started to talk about whilst you were the foreign minister. We really appreciate that, and as KwaZulu-Natal, we are really proud to have you as our usisomdala, sisho njalo. And you really also take every opportunity that you have been given with humility, and we really learn from that. I know that we are to have a video, but I think we cannot shy away from the fact that Her Excellency, we really are grateful that you have chosen to present your 4-year program and the work that you have done here in your province. And we say to you, thank you very much for that. But we can't say that we can't also congratulate you, because for the work that you have done in GovChat, which is assisting, they said it's like these social networks that are popular in our country, but it's in a continent where we are able to chat about government work and also the projects and the programs that the government has. And we are able also to interact through that chat network that they have created. And if it wasn't for you as a woman who looks beyond the horizon and the leadership that you are giving, we wouldn't be knowing that there is something that is called GovChat today and talk about it. I believe that also we need also to congratulate you, and also on the award. You deserve it. You work hard, I know you. Wherever you are given, at any level, you ensure that you work for the work that the assignment that has been given to you. I think through your programs, you have been able to interact with the objectives of the AU, the peaceful, developmental and prosperous continent, as we are looking forward. And all the programs that you have presented to us today in this briefing talk to that. And we are really saying that thank you very much. And I'm going to allow that they play the video and then we move on with our program. Thank you very much.
This is our arrival. Across the plateaus of time and space, shaped by the stories of our stars and suffused by the spirit of humanity. This is our arrival, shouldered by the pride and purpose that unites north with south, east with west, from the barren lands to the bustling savannas, the cities to the villages, over mountains, across oceans, to the islands that sit as jewels around the crown. The inaugural African Economic Platform in Mauritius in March 2017 will bring together African heads of state, captains of industry and academics to discuss intra-African trade, industrialization, skills development, and free movement of people and goods. To join, visit www.africanunion.org. See you there.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. If I can invite the... should I do the Q&A? We'll take some questions, but I wanted to just add that time is against us, but we can take a few questions from the floor if there are any. Can I invite a show of hands? First three questions. So you'll be number 1, number 2, and number 3 in that order. If I can start with you, sir. There's a gentleman with a mic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. My name is Daniel. I'm from Democratic Republic of Congo, and I'm in the organization called Africa Solidarity Network. You spoke about decolonization, and on your speech shows that Africa has made a big progress in the decolonization of Africa. But we are having a view that we are being successful against colonization, but the sub-imperialist countries in Africa, which are there also to do the same thing as the colonialists were doing in Africa. And this makes Africa not to be stable. There's a war everywhere. There's a president who don't like to step down at the end of their mandate. The example is Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo. The president should step down today. But he got the support from these countries, which are sub-imperialist countries. What plan are you going to leave in place to fight the sub-imperialists in Africa? Thank you.
Thank you. Can we pass the mic to the gentleman there, please?
I would like to greet you all, especially you, Madam Chairperson of the AU. My name is Bongani Hanse from the Independent Media. I would like to get clarity on how many countries in Africa that are still captured by the colonizers that are yet to be freed. And also, you have emphasized the issue of education in Africa in order for Africa to develop. Would you please give us a view on the issue of free education, which I might think that will enable children of Africa to get access to education, even though they are from poor families? If you can just give the way things are happening in South Africa with children demanding free education. And also, the issue of ICC, International Criminal Court. South Africa and other African countries have pulled out of this court, or they are in the process of pulling out. What is there? I hear that AU is starting or is negotiating to start its own court. And how is that court going to function? How is that court going to make sure that it does not protect criminals or people who are in power and who are using that power to violate the rights of their citizens? Thank you.
Thank you. Can we take the last question?
I greet you all. Madam Chair, I have just two questions for you. The first one being the issue of agriculture in Africa. You say that Africa as a continent has a lot of agricultural land, but in South Africa in particular, that land is not in the hands of the people who were underprivileged, who can use that land to actually have their own gardens and farm food for their children. So how is the AU, if it has a strategy to assist those people in terms of the land going back to the people who were forcefully removed? My second question is on the issue of your personal highlights as the AU chair. I know you've highlighted the work that's been done by the Commission, but what were your personal highlights? Thank you.
Could I ask you to just introduce yourself? We missed your name.
Noktula Ntuli of the New Age.
Thank you. Yeah. Chair.
Okay, thanks. This question about imperialist countries and linking to the other one about countries that are still captured, I think it's a big question because indeed, as I said, almost every country except a few are no longer colonized. But that does not mean that they are not under influence. Some countries are still influenced, and that's why I read this in 2013 when we were celebrating the 50th anniversary of the OAU, now AU. I read this extract and I quote, the anniversary Solemn Declaration went like this: we committed to complete the decolonization process, to protect the right of self-determination of African people who are still under colonial rule, pledge solidarity with the African descendants in the diaspora who are struggling with racial discrimination. And then this is the important part to your question: resist all forms of influences contrary to the interest of the continent. Africa, I would say, is a contested space. We are not left alone to just deal with our issues. It's a very contested space, so many people want to influence Africa one way or another. And that's why we have situations like Libya today where countries came and bombed. And that's why we have situations where countries are still, some of them, they still have their reserve banks somewhere else. So central banks. So and also the economics of the economic structure of the world still influences Africa a lot. You'll find that it may not be countries that are creating problems for Africa, but it may be companies that are creating problems. So I would say that, but it's not just for the AU Commission to deal with that. It's for all of us, citizens and governments and everybody, because that's why our resources are plundered and not working for us, because some companies, some countries. So it's a responsibility for everyone. But as I said, in terms of land, we've been working very well with women, because on the continent, 70% who work on the land in the continent are women. And that's why they've been so keen to have this charter on women's land rights, because many women on the continent work on the land, but they have no rights on that land. And some countries have begun putting laws that give rights to women. If I were to just quote one in the interest of time, Ethiopia has a law now that women own the land together with men. If you are married and there's a land that that family owns, it belongs to both the men and women. And if they divorce, the land has to be split into half. Whereas before, if they divorced, the men took the land and the women went without. So for us, it's important to talk about land, not in abstract, but in terms of how it helps people on the ground, how it helps women on the ground to better their lives. And women in Ethiopia, even if you are not married, you can still own land. So there are programs like that. And South Africans must also, South Africans were also part of the, some South Africans were part of the Kilimanjaro meeting, where women gathered from all over the continent and produced the Charter on Women's Rights, on land rights. So, of course, the South African situation is very unique in the sense that land was physically dispossessed from Africans in 1913 through that Land Act. In fact, even before the 1913 Land Act, but the 1913 Land Act is the one that is, took more land from Africans. And I think that's why there was the issue of restitution and land claims, that people should claim land. That it's just that the law is there, but the pace of returning the land is slow. But also, we must also be honest with ourselves. I drive around South Africa a lot, especially when I was a minister here of Home Affairs, of Health. There are tracts and tracts of land that belong to Africans who are not using it. In the rural areas, when I grew up, every field was cultivated. But now, you find just tracts and tracts. Yesterday, I was in the Eastern Cape, in Pondoland, and some of the Nkosi, they were showing me just land that is just lying, and people are no longer using it. So I think something needs to be done. That's why the AU feels very strongly in modernizing agriculture, so that young people, because young people are not like our grandmothers and our mothers, they're not going to take that handheld hoe and go and biolima lapha with their backs breaking. They need modern equipment so that they can work that land. So modernizing agriculture is also very important. So that's what I can say on the issue of land. Free education. I think some countries in Africa do have free education. Some poorer countries, Cuba has free education from grade 0 to PhDs, post-PhD, whatever you want to study is free there. Nobody pays for education. Precisely because they recognize that education is the quickest equalizer in terms of the gap between the poor and the rich. If you skill your young people, education will bring that inequality will narrow the gap. But also, if young people have skills, they will take themselves out of poverty and their families, but also the next generation will be more educated and have a better life than. So education is very important, and I think in Africa, every country should work towards it. And at the moment, there should be no child in Africa. We have enough resources in Africa that there should be no child really that is denied education because of poverty. So that's what I want to say on that. Then on the issue of ICC, well, the AU Commission actually has no standing in the ICC. We are not members, we don't participate in the ICC. The ICC is joined by each country using its sovereignty, and they can withdraw using their sovereignty. The AU has no standing in the ICC. But having said that, I can say that we just, we're about to finish the court case of the former president of Chad, who was accused of human rights violation and gross violation of human rights, and was tried. The African Union decided that he must be tried in Senegal, and he has been tried and found guilty and sentenced. He is appealing, so the appeal, we are just dealing with appointing judges for the appeal. So I'm just saying there are processes that can be applied. We are also in the process of developing the hybrid court for South Sudan, because we recognize, we appointed a commission on South Sudan to look at various issues, and that's one of the things that came out, that there were gross violations, so we're establishing that court. That court will be very independent, just like the Senegalese court, because the judges come from all over Africa. They owe nobody anything. They are judges with integrity, and they just look at the case that is in front of them. So I don't think we should fear that if there was a court in Africa, maybe if it was in a country and only the judges from that country, you could say maybe they could be pressurized, but it's judges who come from across, who are not paid by that country, who are paid by the AU. So I think they will be professional and do their work in the most professional way they know. So I think I've dealt with the questions. Personal highlights. Well, I'm not quite sure what are personal highlights.
Basically, the things that you wanted to achieve
Oh, okay. Now it's clearer. If you were to go back to what I said before I went to the AU, I talked about the skills, I talked about agriculture and modernization, I talked about infrastructure, I talked about the intra-African trade, I talked about the basket of issues that are in the human rights and governance, and I also talked about self-reliance, increasing our self-reliance. So I would say that we've really, in the 4 years, pushed those areas, but obviously it's areas that need ongoing work. But we've tried to really push those areas. As I say, for the first time, the AU took a decision that it wants to be less dependent on donors and more dependent on itself. As I read to you the figures and how it's going to fund that, because that was very important for them to agree on how to fund it. But also moving Africa from what was said in year 2000. In year 2000, some were calling Africa the hopeless continent. The UN, during the Millennium Summit, called Africa the development challenge of the 21st century. So by putting together Agenda 2063, we were also trying to address the fact that we don't want to be underdeveloped, we don't want to continue to be a development challenge. But besides the fact that it was developed by African citizens, what we are doing now, which is quite exciting, is that it's being domesticated, it's being integrated into national plans. More than 30 countries have already integrated it into its national plans. Because if it was just remaining on our shelves, it will not be implemented. But because it's being domesticated and integrated into national plans, it will be implemented. And the other highlight, I think, of Africa was the fact that when we were moving from the Millennium Development Goals to the present SDGs, Africa was a step ahead. We came together, we developed a common position. What do we want in those SDGs as Africa? So by the time the negotiations started in New York, we had a common position. Because we were the only ones with a common position, it almost became the basis for negotiation. And so you can see, if you look at the SDGs and you look at our Agenda 2063, they are almost similar, precisely because of that proactiveness that we had. So maybe I should stop there. Thank you.
I can't get the mics. Your Excellency, can I take a question or shall we move to close? I'm concerned about the time. What I didn't tell you is that after this session, we actually have to do radio interviews because, as you know, the AU has other official languages, including our own community radio stations. We have not had the opportunity to participate in the televised sessions. I think it would be amiss of me to not thank the MEC, Bongisi Tole Moloi, for making this event possible. And it's really important that we understand it in the context of South Africa's own plans and the work that we do on the continent. So this has really been an opportunity to showcase some of the successes of the province in the promotion of women empowerment. And I think it is as important that we have rallied the support through works and interventions such as this one around African diaspora communities to promote social cohesion in the province and in South Africa. I also want to say thank you, because what you've done here is to help us to generate interest and momentum in the whole province, but more broadly in the country, in terms of ensuring that ordinary members of society understand the significance of the African Union. I would like to then ask the eThekwini Deputy Mayor, Councillor Fawzi Pierre, to come and do the vote of thanks. Ma'am, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Program Director. Chair of the African Union Commission, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, MEC Ravi Pillay, MEC Bongiwe, Sithole Moloi, MEC Weziwe Tusi, officials of the African Union, honored guests, members of the media, Sanbonani, and good afternoon. Although it's thank you, I have to give my few remarks as well. I rise to salute, or before I do that, I bring apologies and greetings from our mayor, Councillor Sandile Gumere. She was not available today. I rise to salute the entire leadership of the African Union Commission for the hard work over the past 5 years. Indeed, you have done a good job in the mother continent. We pay tribute to all of you for ensuring that the efficiency of this important organization. We thank you for supporting the outgoing chair, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. You have made it possible for her to make an impact throughout her term of office. Program Director, we are all inspired by the list of achievements that the outgoing chair has listed in her address. She has indeed ushered in a new era of hope and prosperity throughout Africa continent. Millions of women who aspire to make a difference in society. Everywhere we go and every meeting we attend, women salutes Dr. Dlamini-Nkosazana Zuma for focusing on the implementation of the Women's Decade program. She used her office to intensify the fight against poverty and promoting entrepreneurship, economic empowerment of women, and ensuring food security for women and their children. She also prioritized issues of health, maternal mortality, and HIV and AIDS. There was also a greater focus on the provisions of education for women, including ensuring access to science and technology. Critically, the participation of Dr. Nkosazana Zuma Dlamini, or Dlamini-Zuma, sorry, as the only woman at the US-Africa Leaders Summit in Washington in 2014 was clear demonstration of the respect that she commands globally. She is not just a local leader, but an international leader. President of Liberia as well, you see, for record. Program Director, many writers and analysts have a lot to say about her. To us, she is an extension of many women who spend their entire lives fighting for equality, justice, and democratic society. To us, she remains the only person capable of carrying on with the vision of Mantantise Makabaika Jama. I tried at least. She's the only leader that possesses the same determination as that of Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks is the gallant woman who refused to give her bus seat in 1955 and sparked a movement that led to the end of segregation. Her courageous act fueled the civil rights movement and inspired Martin Luther King Jr. to get involved. So Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma is an extension of Mama Lillian Ngoyi, the first president of the ANC Women's League. She was instrumental in organizing and leading the anti-pass march, which was attended by 20,000 vociferous women. We believe that the political and economic well-being of a country cannot be achieved if women are massively underrepresented in decision-making processes. As women, we are not apologetic in stating that she is capable of leading any position. And of course, she's a medical doctor by profession, and we have no doubt that she will champion the provision of quality health care as well. She has served as both Minister of Foreign Affairs and Home Affairs Minister. In this regard, we are convinced that she will be able to drive foreign direct investment into this country through friendly political and economic relations. At this stage, Program Director, I want to pause and pay tribute to the staff and entire leadership of the African Union Commission in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. We thank, a special thank you to the program directors, firstly MEC, my sister, Art and Culture, Sports, Recreation, Bongi, Sithole Moloi, MEC of Arts and Culture, Sports and Recreation, sorry, I just finished. You see, I like you so much, I had to compliment you twice. And also MEC who's representing the Premier today, Ravi Pillay, and MEC where's the way, Tusi? To our guests, thank you for coming over. To the members of the media, always, thank you. And of course, for the positive coverage in advance. To the viewers and listeners around the world, this event would not have been possible without you listening in. I thank you. Siyabonga kakhulu.
Thank you so much for those kind words, Deputy Mayor. That brings the program to an end. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to be serving refreshments. If you don't mind, what we will do is we'll allow our guests to leave, and then we'll have an opportunity for requests for refreshments.